Now, late yesterday, the state government released details about how much timber will be available to industry when native logging ends in 2024. Now, that information was shared with the Native Forest Transition Group, which was set up to help industry transition to its next forest management plan. Now, under the changes, timber taken from native forests will be limited to management activities that will improve forest health. And that includes eco-thinning, which involves removing smaller trees from regrowth or previously logged forests to reduce density and competition, and that helps larger trees thrive. Now, Jessica Beckerling is the convener of the WA Forest Alliance, which is a conservation group based in WA's southwest. And she says the early figures released by the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions aren't conservative enough when it comes to eco-thinning volumes.
Yeah, well, look, there's good news and bad news in the information that we've been supplied. The good news is that it's been confirmed there will be no native forest sawlog industry worth noting in WA from 2024. But the bad news is that the information shows there are really some major problems with the thinning program as it's being developed so far.
So what are your concerns around the thinning program?
Well, the McGowan Government has a policy to develop a thinning program for degraded forests, and the idea is that that thinning program will improve the ecological health of forests that have been severely degraded. So we're talking about areas that have been clear-felled in the past, or mine site rehabilitation, or areas of jarrah forests that have been really intensively logged. So for the first thing that needs to be done in order to achieve that is to consult and to achieve scientific and community consensus on what kind of program will in fact improve the forest ecological health. But what we've seen so far is that only a bunch of timber volumes have been generated by the very people who've been planning for timber production from logging activities for decades. We haven't seen the tiniest hint of any justification for how thinning will go ahead and why it would be in the interests of forest health, and there is not an independent scientist in sight. So there's some very broad structural problems with the way that the thinning program so far has been considered and contemplated. And there's also some really serious specific problems that are showing that the yields are just going to be far too high, particularly from the carry forests.
So what is your understanding of what those yields are likely to be?
Well, in the carry forests, DBCA is planning to thin forests up to 95 years old. So those are forests like in Treenbrook near Pemberton, which are very similar to Borenup over near Margaret River in terms of their structure and function. There really can't be any possible ecological justification for thinning those sorts of forests. They're mature, beautiful old forests that have been sustaining themselves over a long period of time. If there is any justification for thinning those forests, we certainly want to see that. And then over in the jarrah forests, there's some good news there, I suppose, in that they're only talking about producing a very small volume of jarrah sawlog. It's up to a maximum of 15,000 cubic metres. So that's down by from about 150,000 cubic metres of sawlog that were being produced over the last 5 years or so, down to 15. So it's a significant drop. And that's only going to be coming, according to these DBCA figures, from areas that are being cleared for mining, particularly in the northern jarrah forests. So obviously WA Forest Alliance and many other groups and individuals are going to be working hard to prevent expansions of mining into the jarrah forest. But on current figures, DBCA is saying that there's going to be a maximum of 15,000 cubes of jarrah sawlog going to the timber industry.
Okay, so some suggest that thinning, though, is going to play an increasingly important role in what is a drying climate. Is that a scientific premise that you accept?
Well, look, it very much depends. In the first instance, what we have to do is define what is ecological health. Presumably, when you were doing that, you would talk about soil health, you would talk about biodiversity, you would talk about resilience to climate change. If you're talking about soil health, for example, you would then have a bunch of parameters about how do you define good soil health and how do you support good soil health. If you're driving around in there with 50-tonne logging machinery, you're most certainly not improving soil health. So before you can say whether or not the program is going to have on balance benefits to the ecological health and resilience of those forests given climate change and the impacts that they've already experienced, you have to define your terms. And we haven't seen any of that yet. And of course, also, you would want to be sure that you had the best possible restoration ecologists leading the development of that program. And we haven't seen any of that done yet either. So there's real cause for concern here. At the moment, what we're seeing is very similar development of a program to what we've seen in developing previous forest management plans that have all been about logging. So at this stage, there's a serious amount of concern coming from the community that when we're putting the cart before the horse, we need to be in fact looking to scientists, independent scientists, the best that we have. We've got some fantastic restoration ecologists at universities in WA, and asking them the questions. What is ecological health? How do we improve the ecological health and resilience of the forests? Not starting the process by talking about timber volumes.
Jessica Beckerling from conservation group the WA Forest Alliance. And a text has come in from an anonymous texter who is responding to the WA Forest Alliance about its concerns about eco-thinning allocations under this indicative figures. The text says, with regards to eco-thinning, Jessica Beckerling from the WA Forest Alliance is so right when she says the state government needs independent restoration ecologists to lead the development of any thinning program.